quick on this, though. It wasn't the deepest of dives, but it was enough of a dive because I do think whenever your team has a player for a long period of time, your own fan base has a weird opinion about that person because they've taken them through an emotional ride. Like, in other words, I think the rest of the world might look at Jimmy Garoppolo and think one thing, and a 49er fan is going to think something else. Because the rest of the world hasn't been on the emotional ride.
Right.
They don't know all the little things that have happened. So same thing with Andy Reid's long time, didn't win a Super Bowl quarterback. His name was Donovan McNabb. If I just throw that out to you, your perception, better quarterback, Donovan McNabb or Jimmy Garoppolo?
McNabb, and it's not close.
How so?
He is more athletic.
Okay.
He did more. He was more successful.
Was he? What was the farthest he went?
This is my perception.
What's the farthest he went?
Before you come back with your point counterpoint, you asked me for my perception.
Yes.
I'm giving you what you asked for, Mark. I got one co-host and a bunch of problems. You asked me for my perception.
Right.
Makes more plays, more athletic, throws for more yards, rushes for more yards, wins more games.
It's an interesting perception. I'm glad you didn't call those things facts because a lot of them aren't.
Well, I didn't have a chance to Google it, even though you mentioned this about 7 hours ago, and I could have done the research, but you wanted my perception. That's my perception.
Who do you think
Mark
has had the most yards passing in a year? Garoppolo or McNabb?
McNabb.
The answer is Garoppolo. But by the way, but their best yardage passing year, it's Garoppolo by like 25 yards.
Well, he's played 17 games.
No, this was not them.
Okay.
Yeah, this was not. So
I'm reaching right now.
So both of them, their best passing year, about 3,900 plus yards. Their touchdown to interception ratio, almost exactly the same. What's the best thing they've done as far as a season in the end? They've both gone to the Super Bowl and lost a close game.
Yeah.
Both have been tabbed as the NFC Championship guy, like they always would go to the NFC Championship. Here's where McNabb has the obvious edge. You pointed it out, more athletic, and he would make more plays with his feet. However, I could counteract that with Jimmy Garoppolo's completion percentage, which blows McNabb's out of the water. McNabb used to struggle to be at 60%. 59, 60% for his career, and that was most of his years.
Era.
Yeah, but I mean, is it still not really?
It was, but not.
It's not like he played 40 years ago.
I know, but I'm looking at his numbers, and I could say different era, and that might say 2 to 3 percentage points.
Right.
Maybe you could allow it, but for his career, 59%.
59%. And
that's
Jimmy,
wildly inaccurate in any era.
Jimmy lives in the area of 67%. And
I thought you'd go 69.
No, I'm not going to do that. Okay. He might live in that area. I don't know them that well. You don't know Jimmy Garoppolo.
So
you have that completion percentage, which at times, within games, within short seasons, even goes north of 67%. So I would contend they are actually, in terms of your results, your output, your numbers, your production, these are very, very similar players. And couldn't I make the argument, Andy Reid has always been a great coach. He's simply got as far as Donovan McNabb could take him. And then Andy Reid finally became a Hall of Famer when, not because he changed his coaching stripes, because he got Patrick Mahomes. I really do. I wonder if Jimmy Garoppolo is Kyle Shanahan's Donovan McNabb. He's having the exact same career as Steiny tried to make this point yesterday, a very similar career to Andy Reid. When his quarterback is healthy, we go to the NFC title game. Sometimes we slip and fall into the Super Bowl and lose, okay? But haven't been able to get over the top yet. Production, output, all of these things are very, very similar. And if you're the Eagles, if you could go back and do it all over again, do you want to move on from someone like Andy Reid? I know they ended up winning a Super Bowl years later. That's a little bit parenthetical. I just, would you want to move on from an Andy Reid? I think in general your answer is like, no. Andy Reid's really good coach. Why would we do that? I think the same conversation can be had and potentially will be had at the end of this year with regard to Kyle Shanahan.
And I agree with you on that part of it because, you look at what this 49er team has done in terms of coaches from Harbaugh, and it hasn't been great. And even going all the way back to George Seifert, Mariucci had a little bit of success, and then he was gone, and then you had a litany of Mike Nolan and Mike Singletary and Chip Kelly, who, by the way, is one thing that these two teams do have in common. Chip Kelly was the coach who eventually replaced Andy Reid,
Eagles, Niners,
in Philadelphia.
Right.
So they do have that in common. Andy Reid 10-9 in the playoffs with Philadelphia from 99 to 2012, and then Chip Kelly 3 years, one playoff loss. Doug Peterson had the one great run in the Super Bowl, and now they have another good team under Sirianni. So would they have liked to stay with Andy Reid? Looking at what Andy Reid has gone on to do, I think they probably would have.
I mean, it's more just realize what you have. I think is my point on this. Realize what you have. You have a really good coach, and
back to 500 finally.
Yeah, well. You have a really good coach, and we can all play the game of, but at the 5-yard line on November 28th, I did not like. Fine, but you have a really good coach. You have a coach and a quarterback right now that when everybody is healthy, they go to the playoffs and they go on playoff runs, and they just haven't been able to get over the top. And we can all have our reason that we walk away with if they don't get over the top again this year. We can all have our reason as to what exactly that is and whether or not you want to move on from it. But I very much believe, especially at the coaching position, I'm not as sure at the quarterback position that'll work itself out. But at the coaching position, this is a game I want to keep playing. I want to keep playing because this feels to me like the kind of guy who he is going to get over the top at some point in his career. Might be soon, might not be that soon, but this is a guy who dances in that space on an almost annual basis when his quarterback is healthy. I'm here for that. I'm here for that because that is very, very, that's dicey to me to be like, you have to win the whole thing or you stink. Mahomes didn't win last year. Josh Allen didn't last year, right? Joe Burrow ended up going to the Super Bowl. Matt Stafford ended up going to the Super Bowl. One team wins.
That's it.
Give me the team that competes in that Final Four space on an annual basis, and I'll take my chances.
And that's where Kyle Shanahan is, and Kyle Shanahan's got, 3 more seasons under this current contract, and I think if he continues this sort of trajectory, he's going to get another contract after that. And if you look at the history of Niner head coaches, you had George Seifert going back for, 7 seasons? He was there 8 seasons. Steve Mariucci, he got 6 years at the helm. Then it was Dennis Erickson, Mike Nolan, Mike Singletary, Jim Tomsula, Jim Harbaugh, back to Tomsula, Chip Kelly. This is the first time, other than the Jim Harbaugh tenure, first time since Mariucci, you've had a coach get this much rope to work with.
Yeah, absolutely. So I don't know. That's where I kind of stand on that. Can't wait to see where this one goes. Obviously, that's going to change or not change this kind of conversation with regard to how it goes to Kyle and Jimmy, and then what they do next. But they've set themselves up again. And another thing, this is within games and within seasons now, 2 years in a row, that we're watching a team, and I always look for this in sports. This is big to me. We talked about adjustments yesterday. You watched the way the Warriors have had to adjust on the fly because James Wiseman couldn't play, and some of the young guys were having a hard time. If you can pivot, if you do better in the second half than you do in the first. One of the things that really bothered me about the start of the season for the 49ers wasn't their record. It was that they kept winning the first quarter and then losing the game. That, to me, speaks to a problem. Whatever that problem was, man, did they fix it. Because they haven't given up a point in the second half in a month, and they were once 3-4, and now they're 7-4. And last year they went into the bye, not looking good. Jimmy about to get benched. Boom, off they go, end up in the NFC Championship game. So this is a team that is reacting to their problems. They're being better in the second half of games and seasons than they are in the first. That, to me, often speaks to coaching and planning and adjustments, and that's how you win.
Agreed, but the whole thing about Kyle Shanahan, I still believe, is tied to 2 different things. One, can you win the Super Bowl? And you mentioned it. It's a very fickle bar to set because very few coaches have ever won the Super Bowl. If you look at the history of coaches who have won Super Bowls, I believe the number is about 30 coaches who have ever actually done what he, of course, they're all trying to do, is win the Super Bowl. So if he doesn't win the Super Bowl, that's not the end-all, be-all. That would lead me to the second piece of how Kyle is going to be judged, and that is Trey Lance. So if you don't win the Super Bowl this year and you're not favored to win the Super Bowl, you have a chance to win the bowl, but let's say they don't. However it ends, if it ends short of the Super Bowl, they turn the keys to the kingdom over to Trey Lance. Well, now Kyle Shanahan, now you are under spotlight number 2. If you don't win the Super Bowl and you have Trey Lance come in as quarterback and Trey Lance is not the answer and you don't win a Super Bowl with Trey Lance over the next 3 years, now you're in a spot where Kyle Shanahan could be vulnerable to a coaching change.